Hello, thank you so much for joining us today on this wonderful November day. I'm Sister Cecilia Joy, a Franciscan sister of Christian Charity, and today we're here with Mike Aquilina. Hi, Mike. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, sister. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you for being here. And Mike, I mean, some of you might wonder, how do I find the guests for these shows? Well, some of them do come through our communications person who works with our sisters. But Mike, I actually not heard about through a friend who really loves his books. So today we're going to talk about the healing imperative, the early church, and the invention of medicine as we know it. Before we get to that, Mike, talk a little bit about how God inspired you to be an author.
Boy, it's so hard to see. I guess we see it in retrospect. But I always enjoyed reading. My teachers told me I was pretty good at writing, and I didn't see anything else that I was even kind of good at. So I fell into writing when I was in college. I got a job in publishing, and I stayed there for a few years, and I just kept doing that. When I was working in the tech field for 7 or 8 years, and while I was doing that, I was also working for the Catholic Press on the side. And gradually, I worked more and more for the Catholic Press. I got a job offer from a publication, and then I started working full time for the Catholic Press. And since then, I've been working full time for the Catholic Press. I guess I've been doing this full time in a freelance way for about 25 years now. So.
Oh, wow. And you write a lot about the early church fathers. How did you get involved with the early church, like, and everything?
Well, I guess I've always been interested in antiquity. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I thought that was an adventurous life. You went to these exotic places and you put your shovel into the ground and you discovered ancient gold or something like that. Anyway, something fascinating. And as I grew up, I found out that archaeologists actually don't have exciting jobs like that. They spend weeks with a toothbrush and a toothpick going over a little piece of ground and trying to find something there. That didn't sound as exciting to me. So what I did was I went exploring in the ancient world in books. And to me, reading the church fathers is a lot like being an archaeologist. It's a digging in these books and finding great treasures that are hidden there. And what I try to do then is share those treasures with the world.
And you do a very good job of it. You've written 50 books, and you've co-authored with Scott Hahn, who's another great author. And you're also with the St. Paul Center for Biblical Theology. So that's really a lot of great work. And with the healing imperative, what I like about this book was I didn't know, and for those who probably want to pick up this book, if you want to pick up this book, you can go to catholicbooksdirect.com or else Amazon, but catholicbooksdirect.com is where you'll get the best price for these. What I didn't know was that the hospital is a very Catholic institution. Like, before the hospital, I mean, you always had, like, you go to, different people for medical advice, but the institution that we know of, the hospital, is very much a Catholic Christian idea. So, and it even helped build Christianity in the early church. Like, the fact that people were able to go to hospitals and get healed really helped build the church. So, do you want to talk a little bit about how you were inspired to write this book?
Well, as I was reading more and more in ancient history, what I found was that there was nothing like a hospital, really, until Christianity came along and established it. There were these institutions in the Roman world called valetudinaria, and what they were, they were repair shops for soldiers and repair shops for slaves, because a soldier and a slave represents an investment. A government has invested a lot of money into the upkeep of this person to keep this to keep the place safe, to keep the country safe and defended, and that sort of thing. So a soldier was valuable to the country. You had to keep him in good repair. So if he wasn't feeling well, you needed a place where you could send him where he could get better. Slaves represented the same kind of investment. But there was nothing like this for ordinary people. Ordinary people just had to get whatever they could cobble together, whatever they could afford, and it wasn't usually very good. The problem with healthcare is that there was no way in the ancient world to make it profitable, right? And there was no way to make it easily accessible. There was also a great risk undertaken by the people who practiced medicine, right? Because they were constantly exposing themselves to infections and infectious diseases. It was not until the advent of Christianity where we had people giving themselves in a Christ-like way by the practice of medicine. So during a time when the church was illegal, when the practice of the faith was a capital crime, you find Catholic doctors making themselves available to everyone, even to their pagan persecutors, in order to heal them during times of epidemic when the risk was greatest. And this is the way people noticed the church. We have records of this from Carthage. We have records from Alexandria and from Rome as well in a later epidemic. But in the 3rd century and in the early 4th century, Christians really came to the fore at a time when it was a tremendous risk for them to do so in order to establish these institutions of healthcare for the first time in human history.
Now, you've studied a lot about the early church fathers. Do you have any advice for young people today, especially young people like discerning their vocations or trying to live a Christ-like life? Any advice from the early church fathers that people could look to?
Boy, I think it's always great to steep yourselves in the lives of the saints and in the lives and in the history of the early church, because it was a challenging time. As I said, Christianity was a capital crime. You could be killed for being a Christian. You were at least stigmatized. You carried around the stigma. You might lose your property. You might not get the job you want. But the Christians kept to the faith. They lived with integrity, and they stayed close to Jesus. You can find great inspiration for that, for any kind of challenges, really, in modern life, in the lives of the early fathers and in the writings of the early fathers, because that kind of persecution went on almost universally for almost 300 years. So there wasn't really a strong hope of overcoming it during one's lifetime, but you were able to be faithful to Jesus. You were able to grow in love for him and enjoy a life of integrity while you're here. So I think that there's a lot of inspiration that can be found. I'm especially fond of reading the Apostolic Fathers, the earliest of the church fathers, because for me, they represent this window into the world in which the apostles were working. These are the men who had received the faith from the apostles themselves, and they were taking it out further into the Roman Empire. So they're a great inspiration to me. If you want to start somewhere, start with Ignatius of Antioch, whose letters were set down in 107 AD, very early in Christian history, and yet he depicts the church as we'd recognize it today from our own parishes.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Mike. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And feel free to check out, and again, Mike has written over 50 books. So if you're not interested in reading about hospitals, there's a lot of other topics you can read about that involve the early church fathers. Go to catholicbooksdirect.com or Amazon, pick up some of these books. They're excellent. So thank you so much, Mike. And thank you so much, everyone. We hope you have a blessed day. Bye.
Thank you for having me, sister. Bye-bye.